I spent 5 years caring for Grandpa while his grandson was partying in Chicago. Then he showed up with a fake will.
I mean, Sam, let's be real here. You were basically a caretaker, right? That's not the same as family. Marcus said that to me at the kitchen table of the house I'd been living in for 5 years. The house where I'd learned to walk. The house where I'd watched Grandpa Silas go from a man who could rebuild a carburetor blindfolded to a man who couldn't hold a fork without his hands shaking so bad the food fell off before it reached his mouth. And I just sat there looking at him. This guy in a linen shirt on a Tuesday in August in Iowa. A guy who'd driven up in a rented Tesla that had gotten 3 different kinds of dirty on our gravel road. And I thought, okay, Marcus, okay. I didn't say anything back. I just looked at him, because 3 hours earlier, I'd watched him stand at Grandpa's grave and cry in a way that made the neighbors lean over and whisper about what a devoted grandson he was, and I'd stood there in the 94-degree heat with sweat running down my back thinking about the last time Marcus had actually been to this farm, which was a Memorial Day cookout a decade ago where he'd complained about the mosquitoes and left before dinner. But I'm getting there. Let me back up. Grandpa Silas died on a Thursday in late July, which in central Iowa means the corn is shoulder high and the air sits on you like a wet blanket somebody left on a radiator, and the whole world smells like diesel and something sweet rotting underneath it. He was 81. He'd had a good run by any honest measure, but the last 2 years were hard in a way I don't think people who haven't done that kind of caregiving really understand. The kind of hard that doesn't look like much from the outside but takes something out of you at a cellular level. Something you don't get back. I'd moved out to the farm 5 years before he died. Not because anyone asked me to, not because of any formal arrangement, just because it needed doing and I was the one who was there. My mom, Silas's daughter, had passed 8 years back. Cancer, and the rest of the family had scattered in ways that are common to families in dying farm towns. You leave or you stay, and the ones who leave tend to keep leaving. I had my job at Kowalski's garage in town, 20 minutes down Route 30, and I'd drive in at 6 in the morning and come back at 5 and make dinner and help Grandpa with whatever needed helping with. And on weekends, I'd do whatever the farm needed, which was always something. The farm was about 240 acres, mostly leased out to a neighbor who ran soybeans, and the house was old but solid, a white 2-story Silas's father had built in the 1940s. And in the gravel yard, there were 4 or 5 old vehicles in various states of existing, including a 1949 Farmall tractor that hadn't run since probably the Clinton administration, but that Silas called the old girl, and wouldn't let anyone haul away no matter how many times I offered. For most of the time I'd been there, the property was worth maybe $400,000. Comfortable but not crazy. Then the state announced a highway interchange project, a mile and a half east of the property line, and suddenly a developer from Des Moines was calling twice a week, and the number he kept mentioning was $1.2 million. And Silas had listened to him politely and told me afterward, "I'm not selling anything to anybody. This land goes to you when I'm done with it, same as I always planned." He said that to me 4 or 5 times in his last year. Just as a fact, the way he stated most things. There was a will, he said, and it was all taken care of. I believed him. I didn't ask for details because it felt ghoulish and because I trusted him. I know. Silas died on a Thursday, and Marcus showed up Saturday morning, and I want to tell you exactly what that looked like because it matters. I was on the porch with a gas station coffee gone cold when I heard tires on the gravel, and I watched this white Tesla creep down our road like it was afraid of getting dirty, which it was, and parked next to my 04 F250 like a spaceship that had landed in the wrong field. Marcus got out in pressed chinos and a linen shirt, and he stood there for a second, just looking around the yard. And I want to be precise about the look on his face because I've thought about it a lot since. It wasn't grief, it wasn't even nostalgia, it was the look of a man doing a quick mental inventory of everything in his field of vision. He saw me on the porch and his face shifted into something warmer, and he came up and hugged me and said it was good to see me, and said Grandpa would have wanted everyone together. And I said yeah, and handed him a coffee, and we got through the next 2 days, doing what you do, receiving casseroles, standing at the grave in the heat, while Pastor Hendrick said the words. Here's what I didn't know while all that was happening. I didn't know that Marcus had been getting calls from the same Des Moines developer I had. That somebody had tipped him off about the highway project and the property value spike. That Marcus had flown in not to grieve but to collect. I didn't know any of that yet. I found it out later from a cousin of ours who lives in Ames and who Marcus had apparently told the whole plan to in confidence, which tells you something about Marcus's judgment. What I did know by the time the last neighbor took their dish and went home and Marcus came and sat down at the kitchen table with a leather folder in front of him, was that something was very wrong with the energy in that room. He pushed a document across the table, and I looked at it, and my brain did this thing where it just refused to process what it was seeing for a few seconds. Like it needed a moment to prepare. It was a will. Notarized, Dated 14 months ago, signed in what was supposed to be Silas's handwriting. It left everything to Marcus Raymond Howell, with a note about the substantial care and attention Marcus had provided in recent years. I read that sentence 3 times. "There's a provision for you," Marcus said, and his voice had this careful gentleness to it, like he'd practiced it. $10,000. Given your service over the last few years, Grandpa appreciated what you did. $10,000. For 5 years, for every appointment, and every prescription, and every 3 a.m. when Grandpa couldn't breathe right, and I sat with him until it passed. I looked at the signature on the document, and something clicked in the back of my mind immediately. Something I didn't say out loud. Something I filed away and held onto like a tool I wasn't ready to use yet. "I need a few days with this," I said. Marcus nodded like he'd expected that. "Of course," he said. "My lawyer will be in touch about the timeline." I went out to the barn and stood in the dark with the smell of oil and old hay around me, and I thought about Silas's hands. Here's what you need to understand about Grandpa's hands, because this is the whole thing. This is the pin that holds the entire grenade together. Silas had severe rheumatoid arthritis in both hands for the last 3 years of his life. And in the final 2 years, it had progressed to the point where he couldn't grip anything. Couldn't write, couldn't sign his own name. His knuckles were swollen and his fingers had a permanent curl that wouldn't straighten. I know this not as a medical observation, but as a daily lived fact, because every single piece of paper that required Silas Howell's signature for the last 2 years of his life went through me. Every VA form, every lease renewal, every medical release, every insurance document. I have a folder 2 inches thick with those papers, all signed by me under power of attorney. The signature on Marcus's will was clean, controlled cursive. The kind of signature Silas had made 20 years ago when his hands still worked. But knowing isn't proving, and I wasn't going to tip my hand until I understood what I actually had. So I went back inside and I told Marcus I was tired, and I went to bed, and I lay there in the dark making a list in my head of everything I knew and everything I could document and everything I still needed to find. And that's when it hit me what I didn't have. Grandpa had told me there was a will, but I'd never seen it, never asked where it was, never thought to ask because I trusted him, and trusted that it would be where wills are supposed to be, with a lawyer or in a lockbox or somewhere sensible. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, Marcus was up early, which surprised me, and he was on the phone in the kitchen when I came downstairs, and I caught the tail end of something that made my stomach drop. He was talking to the developer from Des Moines, not about maybe selling, about timelines about when he could have cleared title, about what the development company needed from him to move forward with an offer. He saw me come in and wrap the call up fast and gave me this look that was trying to be casual and wasn't quite making it. "Just getting some information," he said. "Sure," I said. I poured my coffee and went outside and sat on the porch, and I thought, okay, he's already committed. He's already told people this is happening. He's already moving pieces. Which meant he was going to push hard and push fast, and I needed to find that original will before he created enough legal momentum that finding it wouldn't matter anymore. I spent the next 2 days going through the house while Marcus made calls and walked the property and had the developer's representative come out for what he called a preliminary walkthrough, which I watched from the equipment barn with a feeling I can only describe as controlled fury. I went through every drawer, every cabinet, every box in the basement. I went through the filing cabinet in Grandpa's bedroom where he kept important papers. I found old tax returns going back to 1987. I found the deed to a truck he'd sold in 2009. I found my mother's birth certificate and a photo of her at maybe 8 years old standing in this same yard. And I had to put that one down and walk away for a minute. No will. On the third day, Marcus found me in the equipment barn and looked around at everything with that inventory expression and stopped in front of the old Farmall. "What's the story with this thing?" he said. 49 Farmall M, I said. "Hasn't run in years." He looked at it the way you look at something that's in your way. "Clear it out before we start showing the property. I'll sell it to you if you want it. Otherwise, it's going to the scrapper." And right then, I don't know why exactly, something Grandpa had said 2 winters ago came back to me with a clarity that felt almost physical. We'd been sitting in this barn on a cold afternoon, and he'd said, out of nowhere, "Sammy, there's things in this barn worth more than they look. You remember that?" And I'd looked around at the tools and the tractor, and I'd said, "Sure, Grandpa," and moved on. I looked at the old Farmall. "I'll take it," I said. $500. Marcus said deal before I even finished the sentence. Wrote me a bill of sale on a piece of notebook paper right there. Signed it, dated it. $500, 1949 Farmall M, sold as is. I folded that paper and put it in my shirt pocket, and I didn't let my face do anything. Marcus left the next morning, and I waited until his Tesla disappeared onto Route 30, and then I went straight to the barn. I pulled the engine access panel on the farm all. I'd been into this engine probably 100 times over the years. I knew every bolt and every seal, and I knew there was a space behind the block where the original design had a secondary access cavity that most people didn't know existed and that Silas had shown me when I was maybe 12 years old. Shown me like it was a secret, like it was something worth knowing. Inside that cavity, wrapped in oilcloth and then in a Ziploc bag sealed with electrical tape, and then in another layer of oilcloth, was an envelope with my name on it in Grandpa's handwriting from back when his hands still worked. Inside was a will dated 4 years ago, witnessed by 2 people from town properly notarized, leaving everything to me. And a note. Just personal, not legal. Just Grandpa talking to me one more time. Sammy, if you're reading this, you found it. I put it here because I knew you'd know where to look and certain other people wouldn't. I'm sorry I didn't tell you straight out. Wasn't my way. You did right by this place and by me, and I won't forget it even after I'm gone. Love, Grandpa. I sat on the concrete floor of that barn for a long time. The swallows were coming in for the evening, and the light was going gold outside, and the whole place smelled like oil and hay and thyme. And I just sat there with that note in my hands, and I let myself feel whatever it was I was feeling, which was a lot of things at once. Then I wiped my face off, and I called a lawyer in Des Moines. Here's where it gets good, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't enjoy this part, because I did. Marcus had gone back to Chicago believing he was about to be $1.2 million richer. And the thing about Marcus, the thing I should have predicted but honestly didn't fully appreciate until later, was that he couldn't keep it quiet. He told people. He told his friends, told some people he did business with, told apparently his whole social circle that he'd come into a significant inheritance and his financial situation was about to change in a major way. And some of those people had responded to that information by extending Marcus things. A car lease on a vehicle considerably nicer than what he'd been driving. An investment someone wanted him in on that required a deposit. A few other decisions that assumed a future that was being built on a foundation that didn't actually exist. My lawyer sent his letter 7 weeks after the funeral. The estate settled the way Silas had intended. The farm is mine. Marcus is dealing with a fraud investigation, a debt load he built on the expectation of money he was never going to see, and a car lease he can't afford on his actual salary. I heard through our cousin in Ames that the investment deposit he put down is also gone, because the guy he gave it to was not the kind of person who gives deposits back. Get this, he also had to pay his own lawyer. The better one he hired when he realized what he was actually facing. That bill, I'm told, was not small. The tractor's still in the barn. I'm not restoring it yet. Some mornings before I head into work, I go out there and put my hand on the cold iron and just stand for a minute. Grandpa Silas built a life out of soil and diesel and showing up every single day without making a big deal about it. He watched his family leave, watched his hands fail, watched his world get smaller, and somewhere in all of that, he had the clarity to put something important somewhere safe, somewhere he knew would only mean something to the right person. He knew Marcus would see a piece of junk worth $500. He knew I'd see the old girl. He wasn't wrong about either of us. I had Kowalski give me the afternoon off the day the estate transferred officially, and I drove out on Route 30, past the grain elevator, and the Casey's and the old drive-in field, and I pulled up the gravel road and sat there in my truck looking at the house in the August heat with all that corn around it, the sky going that particular gold-green that only happens in Iowa in summer. And I thought about my grandfather putting that envelope in an engine block and trusting that I'd find it. I went inside, put the coffee on, stood at the kitchen window the way Grandpa used to stand. Some things are worth sticking around for. Turns out, 5 years isn't that long when you end up on the right side of it. So guys, I'm glad you've listened to this far, and if you enjoyed this story, please support the channel with a like and subscribe. Also, check out my other interesting stories in the upcoming videos. See you later!